Welcome everybody to Vigilant News for December 17th, 2021. I am Justin Deschamps, founder of Stillness in the Storm, and I'm joined by my co-host Ryan Delarme from Underground Newswire. Ryan, how's it going?
It's going well. Always a pleasure to be here.
We've got some great stories for you today. First one we'll be covering is the restoration of Clinesmith. We're going to get into some of the things that happened in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and continue to reveal little nuggets of the explosive story we're working on for you. We also have a report about journalists being arrested at record numbers, or detained, I should say. And lastly, a great reset cyber attack that has been war gamed recently, and we all know what that means. So before we get started with today's stream, go ahead and go into the description and check up at the top for the Ascent promotion we have. If you go to Ascent using the link provided and use promo code Justin10, that's Justin10, then you can get 10% off your first order for as many items as you can cram in that digital basket of yours. So definitely check it out. There's lots of amazing things. Pine pollen, there might still be a little bit left, so make sure to check that out. We all know what that's good for. And coffee, mold-free coffee. You're going to want mold-free Joe, that's for darn sure. Not Joe Biden either. We also have our donation link, so go to stillnessinthestorm.com/donate to support our work. You can do one-time donation and subscribe to Subscribe Star in that link. With that, let's go ahead and get into our first round of information. Ryan, what do you got for us?
Well, we report on all kinds of things here at Vigilant News, but there are a few topics that we prioritize above all others. Those including the quiet war with China and the international high finance wizards that seem to want to prop China up as the next world superpower. Durham and his wide-ranging investigation, Maxwell and Epstein, of course, psychological manipulation perpetrated by the media, and this seemingly everlasting war on the middle class through things like COVID lockdowns, the Great Reset, and the Green New Deal, etc. Well, this story has to do with Durham investigation specifically. We have the former senior FBI lawyer who falsified a surveillance document in the Trump-Russia investigation, who has now been restored by the DC Bar as a member in good standing of District Columbia Bar Association. Even though he has yet to finish serving out his probation as a convicted felon, according to disciplinary records obtained by Real Clear Investigations. Check them out. So the move is the latest in a series of exceptions the bar has made for Kevin Clinesmith, who pleaded guilty back in August of 2020 to doctoring an email used to justify a surveillance warrant targeting former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. A lot of you probably remember this. It was talked about in the news for, I want to say, 4 years about. Why is this important? Well, beyond the obvious reasons, Special Counsel John Durham could still be investigating Clinesmith. Clinesmith, who was assigned to some of the FBI's most sensitive and high-profile investigations, may still be in Durham's sight regarding other areas of his wide-ranging probe. The scope of his mandate as special counsel is broader than commonly understood. In addition to examining the legal justification for the FBI's Russiagate probe, it also includes examining the Bureau's handling of the inquiry into Hillary Clinton's use of an unsecured email server, which she set up in her basement to send and receive classified information. Also, her destruction of more than 30,000 subpoenaed emails she generated while running the State Department. An assistant FBI general counsel in the Bureau's National Security Branch, Clinesmith played an instrumental role in this investigation, which was widely criticized by FBI and Justice Department veterans, along with ethics watchdogs, as fraught with suspicious irregularities. So he's not being restored because he's a paragon of justice. It's because he could play ball in the way that the deep state likes their minions to do. I mean, he's implicated in Hillary Clinton's myriad of criminal activity, and arguably he's probably still under investigation. Yet the DC Bar, they set the bar pretty low, I'd say. And to add to what we'll call the scope of the Durham probe, we had John Huber, who some of you may remember, handed over his, I want to say over a year's worth of investigation into the
Mhm.
Clinton Foundation over to John Durham. So all of what Huber's found out about the Clintons will be revealed in Durham's report, presumably. So I'd say this Clinesmith story might look like a win for the deep state on the outside, but if you consider what is yet to come out in regards to the Durham thing, I'd say the establishment is in a deep state of panic,
Mhm.
if
That's-
anything. So
yeah, I mean, it does seem like, oh man, he got reinstated. It's like nothing happened. And yes, he didn't have the customary disciplinary action. Apparently, the DC bar did not seek his disbarment, which is customary after lawyers are convicted of serious crimes. So with respect to what Clinesmith did, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he falsified information that went on the official record related to the Russiagate scandal.
exactly, yeah, he falsified emails, falsifying documents. That's pretty big.
It's
Pretty big deal.
huge. From a lawful perspective, there could be, there's few things worse that you could do, because the way that the law works is whatever gets officially put on the record is what the court has to use to prosecute. So the collection of evidence and the officialization of evidence, the validation of evidence is extremely important. Again, it might be one of the most important aspects of the evidence to lawful process, we might say. So for a person to breach their clerical duty to uphold and maintain the truth, it's a sin, essentially. I mean, there's a reason why the clerk of the court is called a clerk, is because it comes from the word cleric, and a cleric was an individual in the court system. So think about, like, court of a king, who would say, oh, is this information valid or not? And if it was valid, then it would be entered into the record. And once something's put into the record, that triggers a whole set of events. Like, people get arrested, people get put in jail, people get fined, people have their accounts seized, their assets seized, all sorts of things happen once things are put in the official record. So it's extremely serious. Now, the fact that this happened is actually good news for us. You might be wondering, well, why is it good news? It's good news because now we have even more evidence of corruption in the DC swamp. The fact that they took care of this guy and put him back on the payroll, so to speak, of the swamp machine means that, one, they think they're going to get away with it, and two, we have even more evidence to go against them. And I do think there's a reckoning coming. So all of the stuff that's happening that the cabal think they're just getting away with, they're not going to get away with. And it's all going to come to bite them in the butt in a major way, I would argue.
Mm-hmm. And Clinesmith was the first person to be arrested by Durham, the first indictment to be unsealed. You also had Michael Sussman, the Perkins Coie lawyer, Hillary Clinton's personal attorney, one of them, and now Igor Danchenko. So those are just the first three small potatoes, you could say, that have been implicated in this, what has routinely been called a wide sweeping probe. And it seems like he also took this information from Huber on the Clinton Foundation. There's a lot still to come out. And, each one of these indictments, I would say the panic is thickening in the deep state, and who knows where it's going to go next. I will say all roads seem to be leading to Hillary Clinton.
That's right.
Whether it'll stop there or go even further, we have yet to see. But, I would say things are still hopeful for us.
Certainly. Yeah, there's lots still yet to come out. And I think once Trump has his Truth Social, I believe it's called,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be a game changer. Once that's up and running and it starts to dig in and start to influence the news narrative engine that's out there and really countering it, we're going to see some major bombs drop. At least that's part of my theory that I'm entertaining.
Yeah, we can look forward to that coming out in February.
That's right. Only a few short months away. Well, thank you so much for that coverage, Ryan.
My pleasure.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get into one of the other stories I have. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Loftus thing that happened again, and then I'll kick it back to you for our next story. So with respect to the Loftus story, I'm going to go ahead and share a screen so I can read for you guys a little bit of this Rolling Stones article, because as far as I can tell, there is a lot of jockeying and positioning happening. The media works hand in glove with the deep state to prepare the public mind so that any fallout from the truth being revealed can be mitigated. And I would argue part of the reason that happens is they are at the core much more aware of the spiritual basis of our reality than even we are. So because free will is one of the highest laws in existence, we the people, by our inaction, our acquiescence, or our action, endorse all sorts of things that essentially the universe will allow to happen. And so one of the reasons why they reveal what they're doing in a lot of different ways is because when we acquiesce, when we do nothing, we consent. And then that effectively endorses the situation from a psycho-spiritual perspective, especially a socio-political global perspective. So let's get into this Elizabeth Loftus thing for a little bit. So Ghislaine Maxwell defense puts memory itself on trial with first expert witness. So this is something we talked about a little bit before. I wanted to just mention a few things that were really important. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay. So one of Maxwell's lawyers, Bobby Sternman, spent 30 minutes on questions highlighting Loftus's many qualifications, touching on her hundreds of publications, 47-page CV, dozens of awards, and several honorary doctorates, along with her PhD in psychology. Now, we're working on some information right now that I got to be careful because I don't want to say something that could get us in trouble, but we have a substantial amount of allegations to support the fact that Loftus is essentially not only unqualified, but itself could be a fraud, and that her research is not what it claims to be. You want to chime in?
I will say that we know for sure that she has not been attached to any real scientific studies, and that we have mountains of documents, legal documents, spanning, I want to say 3 decades of friends of ours, pretty well-known and established psychologists, engaged in legal battles with this foundation, the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And there's going to be a lot coming out on this in the coming week. So keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. So Loftus is essentially touted as being the False Memory Foundation expert. So when you're trying to invalidate testimony of victims, you go to Elizabeth Loftus to do it, as we were discussing yesterday. Now, this article reads as if they're trying to prepare the public for something, to reinforce something they've already had in place related to the Satanic Panic. So I'm going to just read some sections of this, and I'll comment on it briefly before we move on. Let's see. She testified hundreds of times for the defense trials, but only once for prosecution, whom Loftus said is frequently the one putting on memory testimony, which they want to bolster rather than question. So that's just a review of some of the career of Loftus. Our brains don't work like video recordings, Loftus explains. The process of creating memories is more complex than that. She spoke about her research, which shows memories can be manipulated, corrupted, impaired, altered, or even constructed whole cloth by suggested misinformation. In laboratories, she's demonstrated that people who watched a simulation of a car accident can be convinced a stop sign was a yield sign if that idea is suggested to them after the fact. And let me just speak to this for a moment. In my research into psychology, which I've been doing for almost 2 decades now, not as a professional, I should mention, but just as a person who's taken a very big interest in this, I would say she is correct. Memories are not like a recording. However, the raw data of the memory, the information is oftentimes quite recorded in your central nervous system. Now, what we interact with respect to memories are the abstraction of that. So if I asked you to recount your birthday, you're going to take that raw data and you're going to come up with a narrative that is distilled from that. And it's that narrative that can be manipulated to a certain extent, but the raw data itself can't disappear. And part of the reason we know this is because the subconscious, and this has been pretty well validated, can access all sorts of information that your conscious mind can't really access. And this is part of what the whole idea of regressing and getting memories pulled from things like hypnosis and things like that. Now, a lot of people would argue that, well, you know, hypnosis can plant in memories and distort memories and things like this. And that's true to a certain extent. But again, it's the interface, because when you're dealing with a person's memory, we don't have access to memory. We have to access that memory through a gatekeeper, which is the person that has the actual memories. And it's that gatekeeper who can be manipulated to a certain extent. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that while her research, and we're going to get into this, and I'm going to make sure I know what I'm talking about. So that's why I'm kind of holding some of these cards to my chest, because I really want to make sure these are fully fact-checked and validated. Information can be somewhat distorted with respect to memory, but it's often the peripheral memories.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So yes, it's possible for a person to remember a yield sign instead of a stop sign from a video they saw in a laboratory setting. But the emotional potency of a laboratory experiment is far less than somebody who's physically abused. Think about it. If I asked you to recall a memory from a ride that you took to work, the ride that you took to work is something you've done probably 100 times. It doesn't have a lot of intensity associated to it. You might even be slightly detached because you're listening to a podcast or music or things like this. But if I asked you to recall a memory that you have PTSD for, your emotional investment in the potency of that memory is going to be far greater. And that means that it's less likely to be susceptible to memory manipulation, I would argue, as a non-professional here. So I want to make sure I'm not, legally, I'm not trying to say anything that I can't back up, at least not yet, because I haven't done my research fully and completely. So let me continue on. Loftus described 3 stages of memory acquisition, retention, and recall, and explained that during the retention period, people are susceptible to what she called post-event suggestion, which might corrupt a person's memory. This possibility increases as more time passes. Quote, as the memory has faded and weakened, it becomes more vulnerable to contamination, Loftus said. Suggestions can come from someone asking questions with an agenda, or from media interviews, she said. Leading questions are more likely to mess with memories than open-ended questions. She said memories of traumatic events, like seeing your parents involved in violent fight or having a near-death drowning experience and needing to be rescued by a lifeguard that never happened, have also been implanted in laboratory settings. That's the part I'm thinking is a little bit dubious, and I will, get you some information on that here as the time goes on. She also pointed to certain kinds of psychotherapy that focus on unearthing supposedly repressed memories as having aided the construction of false memories, like people believing they witnessed satanic rituals or had been forced to sacrifice animals as children, the kind of ideas that spurred the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s. That connection right there is one of the big ones I really wanted to make an emphasis on, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to reinforce with this Maxwell case the same general belief. And the belief is that any memory of people committing a crime that doesn't fit our preconceived notions of what is real or is not real must automatically be dismissed as a false memory. Well, I'm kind of being hyperbolic here, but that's the basic gist. And the fact that Rolling Stone took the time to add this into the article means that they're trying to draw from a accepted political, let me rephrase, they're trying to draw from what people generally to believe to be ridiculous and incredulous as a support for what they're no likely will be rolling out in the next week or so, which is that, Maxwell and Epstein were involved in some sordid love affair, but they weren't actually involved in any kind of massive child trafficking operation that implicated high-level people across the planet. So I would say this, what we're reading from here, this Rolling Stones article, is a very carefully prepared and manicured piece of information warfare, psychological information warfare, designed to invalidate our our initial belief, or at least entertaining of the idea that maybe there's something major is going on here. I'm gonna leave it there. That's the main point I wanted to get at. The fact of the matter is that we have access to an expert who might be the most qualified with respect to invalidating Loftus's research, which apparently has happened. That's the claim that we were provided today. It's one of the reasons why we went so long to produce some of the stuff that we wanted to produce today, is because we're getting that information.
Actually, that's why there was no coverage of the Maxwell trial today, because we went and acquired boxes and boxes of documents detailing, filled with stuff about this legal battle that our friends had been engaged with this foundation, this False Memory Syndrome Foundation. So there is what could be a pretty big bombshell piece coming out here in the next few days. And we are in a unique position to actually write this up. So
that's right. So there's lots of amazing things that we're going to be revealing here soon. And this story might deal a death blow to the whole concept of false memories, at least as they're presented by the cabal, which, if that happens successfully, it'll reopen the satanic panic concept in a way that I can guarantee you the powers that be don't want you to know about. So I'll leave it at that, and let's go ahead and move on to our next story. Do you have something about the The journalists.
Yeah. A report came out yesterday, I believe, showing that there's been a surge this year in detained journalists worldwide. So it was Reporters Without Borders announcing, yesterday, that this year has featured a 20% surge in the number of journalists arbitrarily detained worldwide, documenting at least 488 cases, the highest figure since the Global Press Freedom Group began its annual roundup in '95. So here's a quote from the report. The extremely high number of journalists in arbitrary detention is the work of three dictatorial regimes. RSF Secretary General Christophe Delors, it's a French name, said in a statement. It is a reflection of the reinforcement of dictatorial power worldwide, an accumulation of crises, and the lack of any scruples on the part of these regimes. So the surge is primarily due to regimes in three particular countries, which some of you might be able to guess, but some might surprise you. We have Belarus, Myanmar, which we've written about extensively in the past, and of course, most notably and unsurprisingly, China. Honorable mentions go to Vietnam and Saudi Arabia. So you guys have to step it up.
Right.
Let's see. The deadliest countries for reporters this year were Mexico and Afghanistan, where 7 and 6 journalists were killed, respectively. India and Yemen are tied for the 3rd spot, with 4 reporters killed in each country through December 1st of this year. So you can check out that report and our reporting on it at Underground Newswire.
That's right. And of course, we also have the links in the description for all the things we're talking about. You can always do your own research. Now, before we get into our next story, I just want to remind everybody that I help fund Patriots. You can send me an email at justin@ramello.business. That's justin@ramello.business. I have about 5 days to work with. So if you own a business, whether it's an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp, and you want to access extremely cheap funding, it's called the EIDL loan. I can help you out. I just got a guy approved for $300,000 recently.
You don't say.
Yeah. So this is serious. I mean, the cost of capital with this it's kind of like a once in a lifetime opportunity. The normal cost of capital is usually anywhere from like 6 to 12%. You don't have a 2-year deferred payment, and you have to spend it on various things, and you often have to put up 30% and have equity and things like this. But the SBA is literally throwing money at people. So if you have a business and you want some money to expand that business or even create your own business, because there's no requirement for what you have to spend the money on, I can help you get that money. Check the link in the description. Again, the email is justin@ramello.business. That's justin@ramello.business. Send me an email, tell me about your business, and I'll see what I can do to make that happen for you. All right, let's go ahead and get into our next article, which is World Economic Forum simulates global cyber attack that could bring about the Great Reset.
Wow. So our good friends at the World Economic Forum simulating something that is probably going to happen.
Yeah. Now, before we even get into this, let me ask you, if you're a conspiracy theorist, how many simulated events, how many war game scenarios, how many, what do they call those things when they hire actors?
Bogus banners?
Yeah, bogus banners, yes. Fake flags. Have you heard about where there were war game scenarios happening sometimes right as the event was taking place?
Well, I can think of a couple. Let's see. There was that event that happened in New York in 2001.
Oh,
I seem to remember.
September 15th, something like that.
Somewhere around there.
September 11th. Yeah, exactly.
Germ Warfare Games by Bill Gates.
That's right. So if, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just got to ask yourself, is there a pattern that we might be able to use to potentially determine the future as a theory? I think there is. Let's get into this. This is coming from the Natural News, which of course you can find the link in the description, and we posted it on Stillness in the Storm. The World Economic Forum is now predicting a global cyber attack that shares many characteristics with the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19. Klaus Schwab, founder and executive director of the WEF, World Economic Forum, called this crisis scenario a great reset. Quote, the frightening scenario of comprehensive cyber attack could bring a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole, said Schwab. continuing, the COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack. So he's making a pretty bold prediction. In other words, translation, if you thought that COVID-19 was bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. From the producers of COVID-19. Continuing, I believe, this is Schwab speaking, I believe that there will be another crisis. Oh, I'm sorry, that was Managing Director Jeremy Jurgens. And he continues, it will be more significant. It will be faster than what we've seen with COVID. The impact will be greater. And as a result, the economic and social implications will be even more significant.
Sounds like they practiced.
Yeah, so this is, keep all this in mind. As a matter of fact, as I'm reading this, I'm going to stop screen sharing because I had a very good friend and colleague of mine send me some information recently about a major vulnerability with respect to infrastructure and IT. So cybersecurity that is not unrelated to this. Let me just pull that up. Where is that here? Here we go. So let me pull this one up here, and I'll just go over this a little bit, and then we'll jump to the next one. So keep this in mind. We've got Charles Schwab talking about a Schwab. What did I say?
Schwab.
Charles Schwab? Charles Schwab. Okay. I think I called him Swab. He's going to swab some earwax out of your ears.
Yeah, it's always good for.
So this is coming from IT News. Critical log4 shell RCE 0 day exploited in large numbers. Boy, that sounds fancy. What the hell is all that about? Let me read this other article headline here. I hate it when it does this. Okay. Extremely bad vulnerability found in widely used logging system. Let's read this.
It's that kind of verbiage that they use. Extremely bad.
Yeah, exactly. Log4 shell exploit gives attackers a simple way to execute code at any vulnerable machine.
Like a voting machine, for instance?
Security teams at companies large and small are scrambling to patch a previously unknown vulnerability called Log4 Shell, which has the potential to let hackers compromise millions of devices across the internet. If exploited, the vulnerability allows remote code execution on vulnerable servers, giving an attacker the ability to import malware that would completely compromise machines. The vulnerability is found on Log4j, an open source logging library used by apps and services across the internet. Logging is a process where applications keep a running list of activities they have performed, which can later be reviewed in case of error. Nearly every network security system runs some kind of logging process, which gives popular libraries like Log4j an enormous reach. Marcus Hutchins, a prominent security researcher best known for halting the global WannaCry malware attack, noted online that millions of applications would be affected. Millions of applications use Log4j for logging, and all the hacker needs to do is get the app to log a special string, Hutchins said. The exploit was first seen on sites hosting Minecraft servers, which discovered that attackers could trigger the vulnerability by posting chat messages.
Interesting.
Let me see. Let me get this next quote here. This is a very serious vulnerability because the widespread use of Java and this package, Log4j, Cloud4 CTO John Graham Cumming told The Verge, continuing the quote, "There is a tremendous amount of Java software connected to the internet and in the backend systems. When I look back over the last 10 years, there were only two other exploits that I can think of with similar severity. Heartbleed, which allowed you to get information from servers that should have been secure, and Shellshock, which allowed you to run code on a remote machine." So, combine these two stories, what do you get? We get Charles Schwab making one of these, grand prediction events that there's going to be a cyber attack, and it'll just be the perfect thing to usher in the world, the Great Reset. And we have this security issue with Log4j. I don't think you need to be a psychic to see the writing on the wall here, that they are trying to prepare the collective consciousness for an event that they will roll out, just like other pre-planned events that usher in the globalist agenda. Isn't that convenient?
And for those of you who might not know who Klaus Schwab is, he is the fella who famously said that you will own nothing and you will be happy.
That's right. So one of these neo-socialists, they're the marketing team for socialism. You got to hand it to them. They're like working overtime to try to sell this to people. But, as I like to say, nobody in their right mind, meaning nobody who isn't mind controlled, would want socialism in the first place. So,
it's like, so if you're trying to sell putting chips in your brain, living in a metaverse, and yet you've got stuff like this coming out where anyone, any other country around the world can hack into stuff that easily and like completely take things over. Except for voting machines, of course. Those are obviously
no, those are perfectly secure, and there was no fraud in the 2020 election.
Right. Yes. Good to mention that. But I just think it's just there's so much information contradicting other information out there that it's just kind of like baffling.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't know. I feel like the World Economic Forum, maybe in the past, they've had their plans laid out and they've been very like cold and calculated about how they execute them. But this seems like it's starting to become sloppy and kind of like panic ridden. So
I completely agree. I forget where. Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I think we heard somewhere that there was an agenda to destate. Oh no, I think it was in a video, and we know that we were watching last night about some agenda that they wanted to roll out in 2024, but they accelerated it. Was that last night? I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah. Critical plug, and we know.
Yeah, exactly. And we know LT does great work over there. So yeah, I think, this is definitely something that we can try to use to educate ourselves and prepare as much as reasonably possible. And no doubt the white hats are gathering all this information and will hopefully use it to their advantage and our advantage as time goes on. I think we only got one story left. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan.
We do?
Yeah, with just this one quick one. Today, Ghislaine Maxwell told the judge that she will not testify in her trial.
Oh, big surprise.
Yeah, I know, shocker, right? Which, at least the defense has got something right, because that's probably a good idea. She just want to testify in her own trial.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, they did call in the token go-to when you don't have a defense case, call in the false memory lady. I mean,
exactly.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but this Elizabeth Loftus was called in for Ted Bundy, Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein. Can you think of others? Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, yeah. She was testifying, I want to say 350 different cases, and she's paid well. Apparently she makes the bulk of her income by testifying.
Yeah, that's probably what she was groomed for.
Yeah.
I mean, she teaches criminology and law and somewhere in California, Irvine, I believe. But this is what her real gig is, I would say. And
that's right.
And of those 300 and some cases, she has only testified for the prosecution once.
Right. Yeah. So keep that in mind. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I want to say right now, because this particular issue, it really, it gets my goat, grinds my gears, as they say. The fact that children could be abused in the most horrible way you could imagine by your own parents across years of time. And then there's somebody who's out there that's going to invalidate your memories to the extent that you would be criminally prosecuted.
And think of the ramifications of if you're wrong there. You're going to tell someone who's experienced childhood sexual trauma that's all in their head. That's going to compound that trauma and make it all the more worse.
That's right. Yeah. And essentially, we are there. Let me see if I can get that quote right. I think Charles said that let me see if I can pull it up here. If we could raise one generation of healthy children, we would eliminate war, hunger, and hate.
For one generation, at least.
For one generation, at least. So I completely agree. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. There's so much I want to say right now, but I'm going to hold my cards close to my chest, because there's a lot we want to get right when we can break this story.
It's a big story.
So with that, that's the evening news for this evening. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check the links in the description. That sale for Ascent Nutrition is ongoing, so you can use that promo code with your first order, Justin10, to get all the stuff you want with 10% off. And with that, thank you so much for watching.
God love you and God bless you.
Absolutely. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.